I'm back.
Lamb back. Welcome, welcome. Lamb back.
I'm back,
Good
everybody.
morning.
Come on into the room. Hit that like as
Good
you come in.
morning, SG. Lamb back. Lamb
I'm
back.
back. Guys.
Lamb back, Comrade Petunia. We're so excited.
I'm
Part
back,
two.
honey.
Lamb back, Chief Fatigue.
Yes, I'm so excited for part 2. I'm really ready to get into this, really outline, like, it's just a really good chapter, a really good section, so I'm really ready to get into it.
Lamb back, Chief Teray. Veronica. Lamb back.
Lamb
Lamb
back,
back, Comrade Sebastian. Hope y'all got your tea this morning, your coffee, you're ready to get this political education.
Yes, I know.
How are you doing, Tea Pizza?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's been quite an eventful week, to say the least.
Yes. You
Yeah.
got viral this week. Oh my god.
I mean, as we usually do. No, literally. Like, we don't even have to pay for press. It comes to us. Like,
literally all free press. There is no such thing as bad press, right? Land back, Chief Ama.
I'm back. How are you, Chief Federico? How are you? How are you doing?
I'm good. It was an eventful week, as you said, right? Like, oh my God, all these, colonizers were blowing us up about Hammer City, getting us that free press, like they don't even understand. Like, when they blow us up like this, it's good for us.
Yeah, it's literally the strategy. They keep posting that screenshot. I'm like, can you read? Can you read the screenshot you're posting?
Literally.
Anyway, love back Chief Ina. That is my amazing leadership. But Chief Ina's so awesome. Shout out to Chief Ina. Yes, I'm back.
We're so excited.
I'm ready to get into this.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, I'm Chief Federico. I rep the colonized nation of Puerto Rican, colonized name Puerto Rico, and I go by he, they pronouns.
Yes, awesome. So my name is Chief Itza. I am representing the colonized nation of Mexico, reconnecting to the Zapotec people of Oaxaca, and I use they, them pronouns. And I am the chief of the garden committee. Lalak.
Yes, and I'm chief of social media, by the way.
Awesome. So we'll get into this fun. We'll get into the book. I'll show you what we're reading first. We're reading From a Native Daughter by Hawani K. Trass. And yeah, it's essentially colonialism and sovereignty in Hawaii. Yes.
Yeah, so we're excited about Hammer City, right? We just released this week pictures of the land that we have, over 200 acres of land. And it blew up, y'all. It blew up on every platform possible. Like, we had articles written about this land because they know, we're not out here just speaking, and then there's no follow up. No, we have the land, we got pictures of it, and, we're beginning construction. Like, so we need y'all to like donate and support if you want to continue supporting our efforts to really build out Hammer City, which will be a place for the liberation of all colonized people. We're gonna have no cops, no rent, no coronavirus, and no people, no Halleys. So
Yes, I'm so excited for Hammer City. I'm so excited to be free. I'm just excited to be in a world where I can be safe. You know what I'm saying? Like, colonizers really showed the violence that they have towards all colonized people, just how they want us to die. Like, how are you, that really shows that like a white communist, quote unquote, is really the same as a white nationalist. Like, they're working for the same thing. But yeah, let's get some donations in. Let's decenter them. Like, they're mad that they're decentered. They're mad we're building a whole new world without them, and that our revolutionary work is fueled by love. You know what I'm saying? They're just mad.
Yes, donate. Come on, like support this liberation. Like, what I'm so excited about is like just seeing the plans and stuff for Hammer City, and like, what we're gonna build there, just like the way we're gonna be so self-sustaining. It's just like incredible, and just like the collective brilliance of the comrades laying out the plan for Hammer City. Like,
Exactly.
I'm amazed. I'm blown away. Like, I just could not be more excited for this city.
Let's get some donations in. Y'all don't want to be free? Y'all don't want to be liberated? There you go. I'm like,
Yes, $10. Land back, Comrade Bennington. Or is that Comrade Zahir? Sorry. Um, Sarcophagus. Oh my God. What a name. Thank you for $20, Up at
Yeah.
$44. Yes, Chief Yabe. We love those reparated dollars.
Yes, $50 from Reset. Land is power. Yeah, there you go.
Wow.
Fall under the leadership of colonized people, as you
A lot
should.
of reparations this morning.
Yes, Comrade Dio got $5 on it. Yes, Comrade Dio wants to be free. What other comrades want to be free? Come on.
Yes. And
Honestly,
yes, Chief Amo is $5. And reminder, like we have a new we're not doing GoFundMe anymore. It's through donorbox.org/buildhammercity. So yeah. If you're looking for that GoFundMe, you can't find it. No, we're on DonorBox now. So support us there as well. Cash App and Venmo, Build Hammer City.
yes, exactly. Yes, new perks, same Vanguard. Exactly. Nothing has changed. Like, this is what Vanguard looks like. You're shaking. Oh my God. And I just think it's so funny that, like, you guys can't even, like, keep a book club together, much less a book club that raised $350 in an hour. Like, much less a
Right.
committee that's building reverse osmosis filters, much less passing hundreds of thousands of pieces of PPE. Like, you're fixing your mouth to speak on somebody that you can't even compete with. Like, what is
Right.
going on here? Embarrassing. Oh,
It's
Chief Edie
so
got $15 on it. Hell yeah.
Yes, Chief Mace with $5 for Tuesday. Yes, SG. Yeah, like no, it's crazy. We have book clubs coming for us from like universities. Like y'all are on stolen land. Like, hello. And they're like
Literally.
coming for us, like for dictatorship over our lives, labor, and land and resources. Like what?
Exactly. Like, your liberal land acknowledgments will literally do nothing. Like, liberating land will do something for the colonized people, and especially the indigenous people. Like, what? Like, what is going on? It's just embarrassing, honestly.
Yes. Aw, love you, Yitza and Frederica. Oh my gosh. Yes, yes, team. Like, yeah, they cannot keep a book club together, even. And like, what's so funny is like we schooled some like Jesuit book club. I was like, we were like, let's get into the history of like the Jesuits and what they've done across these lands. Like, come on, like,
Mm-hmm.
and you're gonna
Exactly.
come and like try to school us on communism, like.
Oh my God. Exactly. Like, what? Like, first of all, a colonizer is a colonizer, regardless of religion. And like, you're gonna tell colonized people how to dictate their own lives? Like, stop it.
Exactly. But yes, thank you so much for all of your support, your contributions. Y'all, like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Like, we're just continuing to build every day, and Hammer City's just the first step to building a worldwide structure where we have complete liberation for all colonized people, for all people of color across the globe.
Exactly. And I want to thank everybody. We want to thank everybody for your donations. We recognize that we are working class, like, so every little bit counts, from $5 to $50 to $100. Like, that all contributes towards our liberation. So thank you everybody who's able to donate. And yeah, let's get into these read that backs.
Yeah. All right, it's me. Let me open up my book. All right. So let's get into it. Page 69 of the book. The Office of Hawaiian Affairs, though ostensibly for representation of Hawaiian rights by Hawaiians, the only group allowed to vote for its all native trustees, was actually devised as an extension of the state. It was powerless as a mechanism of self-government, having no control over the trust lands, that is, no legal status to stop their takings or misuse, and no statutory strength to prevent abuses of Hawaiian culture. For example, grotesque and servile representations of Hawaiians by the tourist industry. Initially, OHA trustees were unpaid, resulting in a high turnover as board members moved on to gainful employment. Indeed, 3 members from the first board quit after one term to run for the legislature, using their visibility as trustees to aid in voter identification. 2 chairpersons of the board misused OHA monies while in office, although only one was dismissed for the offense. Over its first 10 years of existence, OHA had been plagued by scandals, some sex related, others concerning mismanagement of funds, falsification of trustee credentials, and misrepresentations of programs to the state legislature. Beyond its trustee problems, OHA has been accused by many Hawaiians of being a do-nothing organization because most of its funding goes into personnel, office space, and administration instead of programs for Native beneficiaries. And when OHA does take a position on a controversial issue, it is often on the side of destructive projects like freeways and commercial development. But the worst aspect of OHA is its continued collaboration with the state Democratic Party. Although overflowing with pro-Hawaiian rhetoric, OHA supports destructive developments, such as state geothermal energy projects on Hawaii land that endanger pristine native forests and threaten pollution of nearby communities and destabilization of the volcanic area where geothermal wells have been sunk. A mega resort called West Beach, 1/5 the size of Waikiki, has also been supported by several OHA trustees, despite overwhelming evidence that its hotels, marinas, restaurants, and golf courses will damage fisheries, obliterate historic sites, drain scarce water resources, and forever pave over fertile lands. So sorry y'all for that longer read that back, but I just think this lays out what these structures are. It just goes into what neocolonialism is on this island, and this agency that is supposed to serve for Hawaiian affairs and the Hawaiian Native people, right? But it's this structure that works with the state, the United Snakes, right, to continue oppressing and dispossessing the indigenous peoples of that land. And Dr. Honani Kaitras goes on later on to talk about how this Office of Hawaiian Affairs works with the governor's office to really conspire against the Hawaiian people to settle Native claims. So they eventually they take away the right for Hawaiian people to even have this millions of acres, and then under the guise of cooperation, and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and the alleged Hawaiian governor and their senior senator, right, from the Hawaii reaffirmed state and federal control of all Hawaiian Trust. So they all just work together to deceive the Hawaiian people, and it's all to line their pockets. And I love how she goes into what is plaguing this Office of Hawaiian Affairs, all these scandals, these sex-related scandals, because it's a reflection of the colony. The colony is what does this, right? These horrific crimes and abuses, mismanagement of funds and stealing funds, right? Wasn't it just Ben Carson who was overseeing this agency, who was using a bunch of funds just to line his pockets? Donald Trump, right? Flying to all of these resorts and golfing all of the time, using taxpayers' money to do this, because that's what the colony is, even AOC, right? A whole puppet, wearing $3,000-$4,000 outfits and clothes, right? Because they're not there to serve the people. This agency is not there to serve the people, and it's only there to continue land dispossession and oppression. And it really goes into our third principle, in which all of the problems that colonize people come from colonialism and the submissive neocolonialists within our nation. And that's what this Office of Hawaiian Affairs is, along with all of the state agencies, that are set up by this colonial state apparatus.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Do you have any insights, Chief Itza, you like to add?
Yeah. Full unity. You really just laid that out so well. And neocolonial, like you said, our third principle of unity, that colonialism and neocolonialism are the root of all evil, essentially the root that plagues all colonized people everywhere. And we recognize that, it doesn't have to be, violence doesn't have to be enacted at the hands of a white person. It comes unfortunately, it comes in brown face, it comes in African face, it comes in, Asian people, it comes in all, indigenous people, and yeah, it's just, not all people that look like you are gonna be representative of your needs, of your liberation. And that's why I really love Black Hammer. Finding an organization that actually works for you, finding an organization that is actually about your liberation, not, oh hey, we're just gonna tokenize ourselves to continue white power. So I really like the way you outlined that, and I fully unite.
Yes, land back. And we had a comrade say, these state agencies with this symbolism, just neocolonial sellouts working for the colony's power. That's exactly what they are, and Dr. Honani Kaitras just lays that out, what these agencies represent. And And it's just like really so sad because like, we continue to see this, right? Like with all of these neo-colonial puppets, within the American colony, right? Like, people get so excited and hyped for the likes of Kamala Harris or Deb Holland, right? And these are all sellouts who, are here to uphold the colony that is oppressing their own people, right? Because as individuals, they just seek to collect wealth for themselves, right? Like, and like at Black Hammer, we recognize that for what it is, because like they are just white power in black and brown face, and that's all they are.
Exactly. Full unity with that. Like, yeah, exactly. And you just have to see through their actions, the way they move. Like, yep, Chief Amalicha said, yep, colonialism is the root. Exactly. Exactly. And that's why we have that third principle of unity. Like, our four principles of unity are scientific. They're based in science, like revolutionary science. We didn't just make these up, you know? So yeah, and I fully unite with that. And I just, yeah, look at the way people move instead of what they're telling you. You know, they're like, oh, we care about you. Like, ooh, like, like AOC is like crying over here at detention, like a literal concentration camp, and she's doing nothing about it. You know what I'm saying? Like it's enough, you know. But yeah, we need to expose that to our people. We need to recognize like Kamala Harris is not serving you. You know, it's the people in your community that are serving you. You know, the people in your community that want you to be free, that want you to have access to food, that want you to have proper PPE. And guess who's doing that? Black Hammer.
Exactly. And it's not going to come from any state agency that is, constructed by the colonial apparatus that, oversees this colonial structure that destroys our lives, right? Like, yeah, like these sellouts that uphold it, like, we coming for them too. Like,
Exactly. Exactly. And I think we can do an audience read that back now if y'all want to drop your read that backs. Chief OG said McSci-Sciism. Exactly, McSci-Sciism. Mm-hmm.
yes, and if y'all don't know McSci from our last book trap, like really one of the people who like just sold out their people and began the foundations of COINTELPRO, like just this sellout behavior that like then, the state was able to take it and be like, we can do this and that for the people, like on this like small little scale, give them crumbs, and like keep them somewhat dependent on the colony so that you never rise up. Like,
Exactly, exactly. And when we think about how like our ancestors had nothing, our ancestors literally had everything taken from them, and we still don't have anything, you know. But like, why can't we be as brave as they were? You know, when like literally enslaved Africans braided seeds and cornrow seeds and corn into their hair and ran away. They're like, "F this! Like, I'm leaving. I'd rather starve than be enslaved." Like, and that's the same way that like the colony wants us to be like, "Hey, like you have housing here, you have a job, you know, you want to be comfortable here." Like, no, you're still exploiting us. You know, you're still
right.
enacting a genocide. Like, no, we're leaving. And that's why we're building our own. We're building a new world where nobody has to live at the expense of another. Yes. So
Exactly. These crumbs are not dictatorship. And like Chief Ahmad's saying, colonialism is like a weed. Its roots be spreading and sprouting into different branches, racism, etc. And that's why we gotta uproot it. Sorry. Yes, no, we definitely gotta uproot it and get rid of it. I think Chief Sante too laid out like representation is not self-determination. Like self-determination is us having dictatorship over our lives, our labor, our lands, and our resources. Us as a collective being able to control that, which is not what we have in any way. Who controls it? The colonizers.
exactly. And like exactly. How let's think about the way people move. Like Obama is like, yeah, liberation, but you know, he's pulling a joke on the masses of Flint, Michigan, where he's like, ooh, you know, sipping that water. I don't know if you guys have seen that like really viral clip where he's essentially making fun of them. He's like gaslighting them. He's like, you know, this water is safe to drink when literally all of the Flint residents know that it is not safe to drink. There's literal lead in their water. You know what I'm saying? So exactly. It's just so disgusting.
Yep, and that's just him like upholding the colony, right? Because like the colony's out here poisoning the water of colonized peoples to further our genocide, right? Like to kill us, to keep us so impoverished and poor. And then you have this sellout, right? Like this white power and blackface show up and be like, oh, this water is fine to drink, And then all of these white liberals like being like, oh, it must be safe. You know what I mean? If the president can, like, if you watch that video, he did not drink that water. Like, what?
He wet his lips. He just like,
Literally. And like, all of these colonized sellouts, like also celebrating and being like, oh, it's just fine. Yes, Obama was black Satan glove over America's iron fist. Oh,
Hmm.
exactly. Like,
Oof. What a beautiful, like, just how, like that beautiful imagery, like that was really, you could really see that.
yeah.
Can we
And
highlight Shere Khan's comment? And those of us who experience relative wealth in the colony do it at the expense of the rest of the colonized, poor and working class of the world. Even our crumbs were stolen from our own people. Oof. Full unity. You just laid that out so beautifully. Like the crumbs that we do have are at the expense of our relatives. You know, like the benefits that we experience in the imperial core are at the expense of the people in our relatives in our nations. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Like, and I can speak that like personally, where like I know Canada has free healthcare or whatever because they're mining my nation. They're literally putting asbestos into the air. They're putting minerals into the air that we're not supposed to be breathing. Like, and yeah, they're literally contaminating entire towns in my colonization of Mexico to give everybody like lung cancer, like melanoma. It's really disgusting, horrible thing. So yeah, I really unite with that.
yeah, and it's like even if you do climb up like in this colonial structure, right? Like and reap these benefits, like you're still subservient to white power. You're still subservient to colonialism, right? And the colony loves to show that in every way possible. Like, oh, like even if you do amass some benefits, which will come at the expense of all colonized poor and working class people, like we can still take you out, and like look at how they take out these musicians, like, like oh they just all die of like drug addiction and like, like at such young ages, like Whitney Houston, DMX, right? Like, and it's just really the colony showing, like, we can just really take you out. And like if any of these colonized sellouts were to like come out tomorrow and be like, African people rise up, indigenous people rise up, what would happen? They'd be taken out because they don't have self determination. They don't have dictatorship over even their own lives, labor, land, and resources.
Exactly. Full unity with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's get into these audience read that backs. Let's get into Chief Yabe's. Do you want to read that, Chief Federico?
Yeah. All right. So both the people and their leaders understand the link between mana and pono, the traditional Hawaiian value of balance between people, land, and the cosmos. Yeah, and we'll get into this more with I think our next read that back. But like this lays out like what Halle intrusion or what they term Halle, but we call them colonizers brought to these lands was complete destruction of like the lands of Hawaiian peoples, their way of life, and really then destroyed this way of balance in which people live in harmony with the land, with the earth, with their people, and the cosmos, right? Like understanding that we are beings of the total universe. And Hawaiian peoples were so brilliant, like like they relied on the sea to guide them, they relied on constellations to guide them, right? And like we're able to see it all, and like colonialism took this from these Hawaiian indigenous peoples, like all indigenous peoples, right? And like me being descended from Taino people, like we're very much believers, like we're spiritual beings tied to the earth, right? Like, which is why so many of us profess like we have these spiritual practices and ways in which, we get visions, like through our dreams and stuff, because like pre-colonization, we were so in tune with our earth, with our land, with everything, which is what colonialism has severed us from.
Exactly. Full unity. And like as much as white power tries to just sever that really fundamental connection to the land, like they will never be able to. You know what I'm saying? Because we as
Mhm.
colonized people recognize like we are an extension of the land. Like we are all colonized life. And we're connected to everything, like not only other colonized people, but to the rivers, to the oceans, to the mountains, to the birds, to the bees. We are all fundamentally connected because we are all colonized. Like unfortunately, all life is colonized, unless you're a colonizer. And it's really that binary. You're either a part of the colonized life that exists on this earth, or you are the colonizer wreaking havoc on all colonized life. Okay, so I fully unite with that. I unite with Ooh, that resonates like a gong, Chief Federico. What these like this imagery in the comments today, so beautiful. Like these similes, like it's amazing. But yeah,
Yeah.
I fully unite with that, and I really love that. I read that back, Chief Yabe. Yeah, because it just really literally highlights that we are all fundamentally connected. Okay, so read that back from Comrade Petunia on page 107. Our leaders are tremendously valuable to the are vulnerable to the pressures of colonial governments, insidious anthropologists, greedy financiers, and hosts of other predators. Oof.
Yeah, like this is Honani Kaitrask laying into the colonial structure, right? And that includes the totality of it, the academic institutions, right? Which, come and study us, study our people, then take our remains, put them in museums, like anthropology, like Western anthropology at its core is just pure colonial science. It's race science, right? It's so evil. And, Honani Kaitrask understands this, right? Because these colonial academic institutions and their allied, their colonizer professors, just have no disregard, absolute disregard for the indigenous people of Hawaii, right? Come in and steal their artifacts, steal even their remains, right? All to put in museums, all to profit from, all to write reports on, and then attend conferences and make a name for themselves. And it's just continuing this colonial structure, and it's so evil, like because you're dispossessing the indigenous peoples of things that are so important to them. Also that you can put them in a museum and call people primitive and savages and say like, oh, this is how they used to live when people are still living like this. And they're all predators, right? And then you have the finance part of it, right? Like, which is funding this continued colonial structure.
Exactly. And like you said, the part that especially got me is the anthropologist. Like, that is always so suspicious to me. Like, when I see, oh, anthropologist in China, like, what are you doing? Like, anyway, I digress. But yeah, like you said, like literally, even after death, we are not viewed as human. You know what I'm saying? Like even after death, they dispossess us of our remains, of our ancestral remains. It's just so disgusting. But I want to highlight Sergeant S.G. Ade's Read That Back, where it's like, read that back in the PDF. Colonialism brought the replacement of Hawaiian world by the Haole world. Hawaiian women, including our chiefly women, lost their place as Hawaiian men lost theirs. Like most indigenous people colonized the world over sorry. Like most indigenous people colonized the world over our marginalization meant economic ghettoization. Oof, yeah, full unity. That one was really that was really intense. But yeah, Lembach. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that and exactly just talk about how the world was literally replaced by that, and it's just a lot to ingest, to be honest. Like when you think about just how much death, how much massacre, like how much pain has actually been inflicted onto all colonized life. It is a lot to just sit with sometimes. But yeah, also just how regardless of like the colonizer didn't see gender, didn't see X, Y, and Z. Like we were all colonized to them. They disregarded all of our lives. But yeah, I'm back.
Yeah, land back and like full unity, but like also too like I think this is so important to understand because like colonial divisions has bred like these lines of gender and race, right, like into colonized peoples. And Honani Paitras like lays this out with the Hawaii intrusion, with the colonial invasion of Hawaii, like what it has done to the people, like even the women who like held incredible positions of power, right, like had dictatorship over their lives, labor, lands, and resources, right? We're in tune with the earth and the land there. And like we're never just like, held up in this colonial nuclear family structure in which, they're just domestic servants, right? Like she lays out like how women's power was reduced from life server to domestic servant, right? Because like life server is something so brilliant, like you know what I mean? Like you're serving your people and you're like a servant to the people, to the masses, right? And Hawaiian, like the Hawaiian invasion just completely like destroyed that, and like they had matrilineal names which carried on. But that was all severed, right? And like with the annexation of Hawaii and like killing their queen, like imprisoning their queen, and just beginning this horrific like crime against the Hawaiian people.
Yeah, full unity with that, and also happy Mother's Day to all the amazing revolutionary mothers and parents out there. Yeah, shout out to you. Happy Mother's Day and happy Parents Day. Celebrate yourself.
Yes. Text your mother.
Yeah,
Let her
text
know. Call her. Actually, call your mom. You should call your mom.
exactly. But yeah, we can get into the read that back. Ready? So yes, it is me. I'm doing the read that back on page 87 into 88. So it's a little long, y'all, so bear with me. Okay, so the suffering and dispossession that Hawaiians have endured and continue to endure have been justified by a racist ideology that claims we were better off as American citizens than we ever were as citizens of our own independent nation of Hawaii. despite the historical fact that Hawaiians did not want to become American citizens and protested this to this effect at the time of the overthrow in 1893 and again at the annexation in 1898. Our citizenship status has, according to the American Patriots, placed us in a select class of human beings. Allegedly, inclusion in the United States gave us rights, the much prized individual rewards that Americans wave in the faces of their conquered peoples like little American flags on the graves of fallen soldiers. Universal suffrage, private property, and public education are among these rights that are trumpeted joys of mass consumption, mass communication, and mass popular culture. Americans truly believe that such rights are a measure of civilization worldwide. Indeed, according to the American ideology, every human being, whether from Africa, India, the former Soviet Union, or the Americas, the Pacific Islands, and Asia, wants to desperately follow the American path by achieving such rights. That these alleged rights were forced onto resisting people at the point of cannon in the face of conquering armies is ignoring in the case of natives like my own people, because the ideology of rights cannot abide the reality of imperialism. By rights, Americans do not mean natives controlling their own affairs, holding their land and resources collectively as a people, rather as individuals, or learning and transmitting their own native language, religion, and family structure. Ideologically, rights rights talk is greatly obscured historical reality of American colonialism. The post-war American imperium is now global, as American denial that such imperium exists. As is such American denial that such imperium exists. Part of this denial is the insistence that the United States has no colonies, only little island democracies, such as Puerto Rico, Micronesia, and Hawaii. In these far-flung colonies, the language of civil rights operates to legitimize American control. For example, by entering legalistic discussions wholly internal to the American system, natives participate in their own mental colonization. Once indigenous peoples begin to use terms like language rights, burial rights, they are moving away from their cultural universe, from the understanding that language and burial places are born from our ancestral association to our lands of origin. These indigenous native practices are not rights that are given as the largesse of the colonial governments. These practices define instead who we are, where we live, and how we feel. Lamb back, everybody. Oh my goodness. I love this Read That Back. It just really perfectly highlighted our third principle of unity and just how the core of all of it is colonialism. Is essentially, that is the root of all of it. And it's also part of principle of unity number 1, where it's all colonized people have the birthright to self-determination. And these rights only serve to uphold American colonialism. Like, these rights to water, these rights to bury our ancestors, like, these are not rights. These are not rights for a colonial government to give us. This is our like literal birthright. Like, I guess that may be confusing, but it's our right as human beings to do the things that we do. Like, and a colonial government doesn't have to tell us like, oh, you're allowed to vote. Like, also, if voting did anything, we wouldn't be allowed to vote. Anyway, I digress. But yeah, and I love the fact that Hawani K. Trask highlights that this American colonialism is global. This American imperialism is global, from Africa to India to the Americas to Pacific Islands to Asia. Like, we are all colonized, and that's really an example of how all colonized people need to unite. We have our common enemy is American, like, it's Euro-American colonialism, imperialism. Like, it is violence at our expense. It's the violence at the hands of a white person. It's the violence at the hands of a colonizer. Yeah, and I also just wanted to highlight that this disrupted the natural way of life. Like, we're not supposed to exist in this way, and these rights only serve to reinforce the fact that it only serves to uphold this like American colonialism, this American imperialism. So these rights are more colonial nonsense to make us think that we are not already guaranteed dictatorship over our lives, land, labor, and resources. Exactly. Like, what does it mean that, what does it mean to, like, I don't know, what does it mean to have rights, like, in a colonial system when I don't have access to the land, when I don't have access to my people, like, access to the resources? Like, that doesn't mean anything at all in any capacity. So yeah, Chief Federico, I'd love to know your thoughts on this.
No, full unity. I thought this was such a beautiful read that back. And it just ties into like our first principle of unity, right? In which colonized peoples should have dictatorship over our lives, labor, land, and resources, not rights. Like rights is imposition of the colonial structure upon us. And these were all things that were sacred to us. You know, and like private property rights, like that was not a concept pre-colonization on our lands, right? Nobody owned the land, you know what I mean? Like we were a servant to the land, to the earth, to the sea, to our people. You know, we existed collectively versus individually. And that's what rights are, is just like to give the individual like, you know, these things, but it comes at the expense of the collective, you know, and it wears it down, like destroys it, you know, and it's only for the benefit of the colonizing class and never colonized peoples. And that's what Dr. Honani Kai Trask is laying out so brilliantly here, is like, you know, rights is, it just does not make sense in an indigenous framework to any colonized peoples, right? Because like we're indigenous to lands that we have been ripped away from and descend from, right? And these were all things that were guaranteed to us pre-colonization. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what the hell is a burial right? Like, what? It never makes sense, you know? And to me, like, I still struggle with the concept of private property rights. Like, you know, like, it's just so horrific. Because, like, how do you think that you should own land? You know, like, this is like how like CIC Ghazi has laid out, like Mother Earth is our greatest comrade, you know, like why are we not a servant to the earth, to the land, and think that we should take control of it, you know, just to build what, like golf courses, to build hotels, like all things that destroy the land.
Exactly. Like, what is it like? Literally, what does it mean?
Yeah,
Comde said, when we don't have access to our own history and land, rights don't mean anything when my people and I have been displaced and don't have access to our ancestry. Full unity with that. Like, rights mean nothing, literally nothing, zero. Like, literally the only thing they serve is to uphold this imperialism that we are all facing as colonized people, like colonialism, imperialism, like, and that's why we need to unite, like as colonized people all over the world, not just in the imperial core, but globally. Like we need to unite because it's the same, you know, the boot on my neck is it's has its hand wrapped around yours, you know, so yeah, let's, you know, colonized people unite.
yeah.
Yeah, I just fully unite. And yeah, you can't own the land. Like, what a ugly colonizer way to think. Like, yeah, no one can ever own the land. The land belongs to herself. Exactly. Full unity, Chief
And
Santi.
it's
Like,
like, ooh, sorry to cut you off. Like, yeah, no, I just too wanted to add like this talk around rights too is like used to further colonization and imperialism, right? Like Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations, right? And it's like, oh, all lands across the world, particularly the colonized world, should have these rights, right? And it's like if they don't, like they're seen as like savage and barbaric, and then you know there's planned invasions, right? Which first start with like the Peace Corps, or like you know foreign service officers going into the land, you know what I mean, which is just surveying it for further colonization. And then you have like, you know, it used to be missionaries, right, but you have like Peace Corps go in, and then you have like other colonial institutions then go in, right, to then all begin and set up the framework for colonial domination. And then what follows is eventually military imperialism, right, which the military comes in, sieges your land, kills the people, displaces the people, right, all to extract resources and exploit the labor. Um, yeah, and so like this whole rights framework too is just like so insidious because that's what it's used for. You'll never have rights under a colonial system because the talk around rights within colonialism is used to further colonization and imperialism.
punto. Literally, like you literally cannot you can't show me one example where the use of human rights is actually serving the people, is actually liberating the people. Yeah, so we're gonna go into actually, I just want to highlight one more. Chief OG's comment where they said, yes, preach. That read that back connects to this one. They make us think that these rights they impose on us make us more civilized, while they the most uncivilized people to ever think that some people deserve water and some don't. Full unity. Like, how are you going to how are you going to deny a human being the essential resource that is water, that is food, that is shelter, that is, you know, access to healthcare, access to education, like, you know, all these rights, you know, and like Hawani K. Trask outlines like, specifically what we just said, where universal suffrage, private property, and public education are among these rights. Like, What? Like, are you? It's wild to just read it. Like, private property in what capacity? Okay, cool. But yeah, I just wanted to further talk about like private property. Like, how are you gonna own the lands? The lands, like a life-sustaining entity, a deity, like the reason we exist. It's just so it's such a colonizer way to think, and like having no respect and connection to the land. It's just so vile and disgusting. And like that's why we have to build a world free of that mentality, free of those people, like free of the violence that they perpetrate. Like, you know, that's why I'm so excited for Hammer City. Let's get into Hammer City fundraising. Like, I'm ready to get these funds. I'm ready to go to Hammer City as soon as possible.
ASAP.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, Hammer City is a city for all colonized people, aka people of color. There will be no discrimination based on anything, based on gender, age, mental, physical differences, etc., which is our second principle of unity. And there will be free housing, free food, free healthcare, and importantly, there will be no pigs, no rent, no coronavirus, and no colonizers. So that is super exciting. And our first Hammer City will be in Turtle Island, in what is known as Colorado. So yeah, let's get some donations coming in.
Yes, I know y'all want to be free. I know y'all are excited for Hammer City. Like, are you not excited to have a liberated space? Like, we liberating the land, we liberating ourselves, our people. Like, that's just so exciting.
Yes, I'm so excited. And drumroll, we have raised $294 so far. Woo! But I know we can get to 400. We can aim for $400 because we want to get free. We want to get free. The crisis of imperialism is only getting more intense. It's only crumbling. Like literally everything we see around us is falling apart. So yes, Comrade Dio got $10 on it. Shout out to Comrade
Yeah,
Dio.
land back. Yes, Comrade Daya. Yeah, did you see Chief Itza? Like this huge colonial pipeline? It's literally termed colonial pipeline, like mask off, right? But like the largest pipeline in the United States, like had a cyber attack and it delivers like 45% of fuel to the East Coast, you know what I mean? And they had to seize all operations. Like this is only going to continue to worsen as the crisis of imperialism, continues to worsen, right? And like we need to get the hell out of the United States, out of this imperial core, and begin liberating the land. Because like one, this pipeline was so destructive to the land, to the earth, right, and to our peoples. It was polluting our waters and everything else. But our people, you gotta understand, like this colony is crumbling quick.
Exactly. Exactly. And okay, so an attack on the land is an attack on the people. I want us all to internalize that. An attack on the land is an attack on the people. Can we get that in the comments? An attack on the land is an attack on the people. Okay, so when we attack the land, when the colonizers attack the land, they attack all colonized life, including us, a colonized people. So we need to really internalize that. And what we're doing in Hammer City is not only liberating the land, but we're liberating the people. Like you can't liberate the land, not liberate the people. You can't liberate the people, not liberate the land. They're both one and the same. So we recognize that to liberate the people is to liberate the land as well. There we go. An attack on the land is an attack on the people. Yes. Yes.
Exactly. And Dr. Bonani Kaitras, like, she lays that out in like this book too. Like, dispossessing the indigenous peoples of the land is really an attack on their sovereignty, on who they are, because the land is so critical to who they are, right? And if you take away the land, what are you doing?
Exactly. Yep. And we at Black Hammer enact our one touch, one touch all policy onto the land as well. You impose violence onto the land, you will be met with colonized resistance. Colonized, like I'm not gonna get too detailed on this live, but it's not gonna be cute for you. Is what I'm gonna lay out right there.
Yes, full unity.
Yeah.
The land is part of us, and we're part of the land.
Thank you, Chief Maya, for those $15. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Chief Maya. Thank you, Sarcophagus. What a name.
I love it. Yes, an attack on the land is an attack on the people. Colonizers who want to disunite with this need to unite under colonized leadership. There you go, Sarcophagus. Coming with the hits and those reparations, as you should. As you should. But exactly, like, we recognize that. Look at the state of the world under your stewardship for 600 years. And not stewardship, you're enacting on 600 years of war, literally 600 years of prolonged genocide and war on all colonized life, literally all colonized life. And look where that has led us. Where scientists say there's like 10 years until we meet that, until we surpass that 2 degrees Celsius like threshold. Like, and you want colonized people to still believe you, to still trust you? Like, stop it, stop it. Like, no. So we're taking our freedom. Yes, $10 for freedom.
Yes, $10. CIC Ghazi.
Thank you, CIC. Yes. Yeah, exactly. 600 years of war, not stewardship.
Yeah.
Exactly. War. Like, war on all colonized life. The devastation that we as individual colonized people can literally not even fathom. Like, it's literally unfathomable how much death and destructions they have caused for 600 years. However, we were self-determinate before then, and we will be self-determinate after. Like, punto. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, that's what's gonna happen.
And it's like all of that violence and war began in Europe, right? Like they were attacking their own people, each other, and then exported it on a much more horrific and grand scale to the colonized world. And it's like all these Europeans love to say, like, "Ah, but we suffered this form of colonization in Europe," but it was like by other Europeans, and then you exported it and made it everyone else's problem across the colonized world. And that destroyed the world. And then you're gonna come tell us like, "Oh, I'm so colonized." Like, meanwhile, you get to come to like, the United States or Australia and assimilate into the structure of whiteness and just be white, which then comes at the expense of all colonized people here.
Exactly. Exactly. Full unity. I love the way you just laid that out. Okay. Oh, okay. So let's see. Keep donating, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for your donations. Let's keep donating. We're gonna move on to our next Read That Back, though.
Yes. Is this me?
Yes, that is you, Chief Federico.
All right. I just love this Read That Back because I think it just lays out, like, we're going to get into it. Is this the right one? Yeah, on page 89. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so the first stage of resistance involves a throwing off or a peeling apart of a forced way of behaving. Layers of engineered assimilation begin to come loose in the face of alternatives, native cultural alternatives. Usually this process means tremendous psychological tension as a conscious rejection begins with cultural habits, first ingrained by colonial education, a foreign language, and a fearful daily relationship with the dominant white class. Frantz Fanon identified this process as the birth of a new revolutionary human being. Others, such as the African writer Ngugi wa Thiong'o, call it decolonizing the mind. All across the Pacific Islands, and for at least the past 40 years, natives have been decolonizing their minds. Hawaiians, too, are participating in the same decolonizing process, often mistakenly referred to as cultural revival. Anthropologists and politicians rarely use this term because it has no political context. The primary emphasis is usually on trivializing quaint practices and beliefs rather than on supporting conscious native resistance to cultural imperialism. But decolonization is political at the core because it functions to unscrew the power of the colonizing force by creating a new consciousness, very critical of foreign terms, foreign definitions, and foreign solutions. Predictably, dangers arise in the early stages of decolonization, just as they do in any radicalizing process. For example, participation in native culture merely as recreational activity stunts the growth of a critical political posture. By definition, recreational culture is peripheral, on the fringes rather than at the center of daily life. As recreation, this kind of cultural participation does not pose a direct political challenge to the dominant forces within society, that is, the very forces that control daily life. Worse, Hawaiian culture is constantly in danger of commercialization. The hula and Hawaiian language are easily incorporated into and transformed by tourist promotions, hotel festivities, and the ideological sea of commercialism that washes over our lands. But paradoxically, recreational culture does create a rich medium for politicization. Even with the slick predations of tourism, things Hawaiian allow reenactment of cultural ways tied to our land and our unique genealogical understanding of life. To counter the impulse toward commercialism, a politicizing agent must enter this medium, precipitating the growth of political consciousness. Sometimes the agent is an elder whose cultural wisdom includes a sense of politics. At other times, the agent is an older friend or relative, what we call kuana. I'm gonna like slaughter this name, but kuana, who consciously organizes and leads younger Hawaiians towards decolonization. These people operate in an already highly politicized world where the push for sovereignty has been in the air for over 15 years now. Their function is thus greatly aided by common public understanding that sovereignty is a familiar demand and given global resistance by colonial powers and a much contested demand. And so then she goes on, from my intimate participation in the Hawaiian movement for self-determination, it is obvious to me that these politicizing agents have most often been women, young nationalist women. Occasionally older women with cultural knowledge have evolved into nationalists, but they lead by virtue of their cultural mana or power rather than by political mana. And I just wanted to connect this to just a small paragraph on page 93 to really end it off, in which she lays out how colonialism brought the replacement of the Hawaiian world by the Hale world. Hawaiian women, including our chiefly women, lost their place just as Hawaiian men lost theirs. Like most indigenous peoples colonized the world over, our marginalization meant economic ghettoization. We were to become a semi-skilled labor force for the Hale capitalists. Above all, the loss of our land base denied us political and economic power. And so someone already laid that out in the Read That Back, but I think this is just such a great Read That Back in terms of understanding what does decolonizing your mind mean in a world, in a colonial structure, right, in which you have been colonized since birth, right, propagated since birth in every way with the world of the colonizer, right, a world that's kind of foreign to you as a colonized person. That does not make sense, right? And as you begin to understand and get tuned into your culture, right, like she's laying out how like this becomes kind of, in some sense, for some people, like this radicalization process, this way of understanding that if you're going to begin to partake in your culture and your practices that have been severed from you, why are they severed from you in the first place? And then why do you experience such resistance when you do practice these ways? That's often what happens. And she's laying that out so beautifully. And then, you know, ends it because like, I remember too, like when I first kind of got woken up to like my own kind of process was like my aunt telling me like where like our people descend from, who they are, you know, because like I didn't really have much idea. And then like that just began it all for me. I was like, what the heck? Yeah, and I was like, this makes so much sense in terms of the world and how it operates. And so I think, you know, and then so I wanted to tie this back and the fact that like all our problems as colonized people come from colonialism, from submissive colonialists within our nation, right? The submissive neocolonialists within our nations. And that, you know, like she's laying out like how she finds that, you know, it's women who often begin this practice, but I tied it to page 93 where, you know, it talks about this intrusion of the Hale people, of the colonizers who have besieged Hawaii and set up this colonial structure, right, in which all colonized people suffer under. You know, and like, even though she may find that like women, you know, are the ones to begin this radicalization process, that does not mean all colonized peoples do not suffer and that all colonized peoples cannot be equally anti-colonial, which ties into our second principle that we're all equal. And Honani Trask like used to call herself a feminist before. Then she had this whole speech, right, like where she like denounced feminism for what it is, like it's for white liberal women, you know, for colonizer women. Because it's, as we discussed, like so tangled up in human rights and like what that is, right? And it doesn't recognize the complete oppression of all colonized peoples who have suffered under this colonial structure. So yeah, like I just think it's so beautiful. What do you think, Chief Issa?
I fully unite with that. And the part that really stood out to me the most was the part where they call it cultural revitalization. And because they don't, for them to be able to put it into context would mean for us to wake up, essentially, you know, for them to be like, oh, by the way, like the reason you can't speak your indigenous language, you don't have access to the closed practices is because we displaced you. like, sorry about it, like, what, like, you know what I'm saying? So I fully unite with that, and like understanding that a reconnection to our people, reconnection to our land is part of this radicalization process. That's why they call like indigenous people Latinos. That's why they call African people Black people. Like, you know, they are trying to disconnect us and sever us from who we actually are, like our fundamental identity. So I thought that was really important. And they just, yeah, I think it's just so silly. Like the word cultural revitalization made me laugh. Like it would be funny if it wasn't so violent, you know, like it would be funny if it wasn't so like brutal and like just disgusting, you know. So I feel unite with this, and I really like that read that back that you selected.
Yes, full unity. And two, I like how she lays out like some people, get into this process where they get in tune with their cultural practice and stuff, but then like kind of like commercialize it, right? And they never go anywhere with it, right? Like you're just kind of doing it, and it becomes for like the white man's eye, like, and it never becomes like what it should be, right? And like Dr. Honani Kaitras like has this beautiful speech, right, where she's like, cultural people need to become political, right? Like you cannot just like, speak your language and like get in tune with the culture, but then not be political and fight for your people as well, right? Like and she's like, you can't just like come to these meetings and then expect a land base if you're not going to fight for your people. And like that's kind of laying it out too. And her saying like sometimes it takes an elder to like nudge people, and like to begin to awaken to this political process as well as getting in tune with the culture.
Exactly. And like when I think of elders, I also think of cadre. Like I think of the cadre that developed me, that built me. Like, you know, a lot of arco communists will be like, "Oh yeah, the people lead themselves." Like, girl, I was the people. I was the people. And I was not gonna be able to lead myself because I didn't know anything. Like, and that's not to say that undermining the intelligence and the brilliance of our colonized people, but we're just disorganized. We don't know where to start. So that's why I really appreciate Black Hammer and how cadre is really just so important. Like to develop dedicated and motivated revolutionaries that will continue to develop other like colonized people into dedicated, motivated revolutionaries. Like it's just really a beautiful process. And like again, that's why I shout out Chief Ina, Chief Ren all the time. Like they really built me. Like they really helped me develop into this cadre. Yes, what's the people without leadership? Exactly, exactly. I'm like, what? You think leadership is cult behavior? Like that's embarrassing. That you have no like semblance of like revolutionary science. Like, ooh, okay.
Yeah, it's like America, you know what I mean? Like is organized around our death. Like, are you telling me this is as like much as we would like to joke about like the disunity, like there is so much disunity right within the American colony and everything else, but like it does have a military apparatus that is built around their death and destruction, right? It has an economic apparatus that's built around like financing us off our own land and dispossessing us, right, to like create more colonial structures. And it's like you cannot achieve liberation without organization.
Punto. Exactly. And to think that again, and this is also another issue I have with arco-communism or anarchy in general, like to think that human beings are any different than the natural world. Like the cells in our body, the atoms in our body are organized. The fish in the sea that move collectively are organized. The ants that like work together to get, a piece of like cake crumbs and things to bring it back to their like ant colony. Like we are part of the natural world, so we must be organized, just like everything else is organized. So yeah, I just really like, again, this is just another example of how we are literally the land. We are literally all life that is connected around us. So I just think that was really powerful.
Wow, that was so beautiful, Chiquita. You laid it out. Like, that's such a beautiful way to think about it. You know what I mean? Because all of life is so organized, right? And like, why would we as humans be any different? Like, we were organized pre colonization and we'll be organized afterwards.
Punto,
But
punto.
it'll be for liberation, not death and
Exactly.
destruction.
Exactly. But yeah, we can get into an audience read that back if we still have some time. See if there's any other read that backs. Definitely drop them in the comments.
Yeah. Do you want to read this, Chiquita?
Yeah, I can read this. Read that back, page 30. Finally, there's an argument that America and the American way of life are superior to native countries and the native ways of life. This argument is constantly advanced to justify the American annexation of Hawaii and continued control over native resources. Exactly. I fully unite with that. Like, superior to what? To the amazing, amazing. Yo, let me get started. Let me get started because, like, in comparison to what? Y'all were pooping in your own water. Like, we had entire civilizations that were using like really scientifically planned like agricultural systems. Like, what are you talking about? Like, compared to what? But exactly, and it's a means to justify the violence that you're imposing onto all colonized life, onto specifically Hawaiian people, and like over their resources. Like, what? Honestly, yeah, it's wild. Because I, as a colonized person, can literally not wrap my mind around that. Like, the audacity, they didn't even bathe. Come on, Chief. I said, the audacity, they didn't even bathe. Oh my God. Exactly. The audacity to think that you're better than like these colonized people who were not only able to live collectively in harmony, but also in harmony with the land, to build these beautiful like communities. Like, exactly. So
Yes, exactly. And that's like exactly what the structure of racism is, you know what I mean? It's this science used to justify like our oppression and land dispossession and all of that, right? Because the Western life is so superior, the European life is so superior, right? But that does not exist with harmony with us, with the land, you know, and it's so destructive as we see. And it's just crazy because, like, as you laid out, like, we had such beautiful societies pre-colonization, right? Like, and to think, like, oh, Western life is so superior to our native ways. Like, what? How
yeah,
is
just
thousands of years of civilization inferior to I'm dead. No, for real. And like, I remember, like, one time I literally had a manager at work, like, because I was telling them like about my history of like peoples of Puerto Rico, like how we're still like a colonized and oppressed people, right? And like all of Puerto Rican is like colonized native land, right? Like um and like how the people still suffer today, and like this colonizer literally had the audacity to be like, oh, well, like, isn't that better? Like today, like, you know what I mean? Like, at least you have access to like American healthcare system and blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, no, are you kidding me? Like, when you untangle all of these things, like, the American healthcare system is responsible for sterilization of our women, like, killing our people, like, implanting cancer into our people for experiments because they believe, like the people of Puerto Rico to be like the worst race to inhabit the earth, like all of these things, right? Um, and it's just crazy that people like think, oh, the Western life is just superior to like what we had pre-colonization, when you
like
can see all of the problems. Like,
exactly. Like, it was better for you, the colonizer, because again, you were like drinking water with your own feces. Like, that was it was better for you. It was better for you to wreak havoc and to damage and like literally impose violence on all non-white life, like all colonized life. Like, it's horrible. Like, we are
exactly.
not better for it. You are better for it. You are better from like stealing from us, from stealing, not only using our bodies for experiments like you laid out, Chief Federico, but like our land, like I don't know if you guys have, if anybody knows about Bikini Island, where they told the indigenous people of that land that they were going to come back when they did literally bombed it. They literally exposed them to so much radiation. They're like, well, you can't come back. Like, it's literally uninhabitable. Like, it's just so disgusting. It's so vile. Whew, Lord, let's get into this next. Read that back. Let's take a breather. Let's get into this next. Read that back. Alrighty. So this is on page 104 in the book. Under colonialism, this essentially is talking about like blood quantum, just to give everybody some background, and who is native and who is not native. So under colonialism, this identification is transformed into pejorative categories that take on legal force. For example, the United States government has identified a Native Hawaiian as someone with 50% or more blood quantum. Those who meet this blood requirement are eligible for lands and revenues. Those who do not meet this test are completely dispossessed. As a result, our people are divided by race, something that was foreign to us and our identity as a nation. Beyond the question of who is and is not indigenous looms the power to define and thus determine who we as Native peoples will be in the future. Imposed systems of identification are instituted to separate our people from our land and from each other in perpetuity. Again, using my people as an example, the white people who created our classification hoped that Hawaiians of 50% or more blood quantum would eventually die out, thus leaving our lands and revenues not to Hawaiians of less than 50% blood, but to the state and federal governments. The experience of legal identity is all identities. The experience of legal identity is, as all identities, both psychological and political. Who we believe ourselves to be is often not what the colonial legal system defines us to be. This disjunction causes a kind of suffering nearly impossible to end without ending all colonial definitions of who we are. Barring this, we are constantly in struggle with the government agencies and sometimes with our own people. We are besieged by the state powers attempting to decrease our numbers and therefore our claims by merely defining us out of existence. Or we are categorized in a manner alien to our cultures in hopes of strangling our ancestral attachments to our own people. Whew. Oh my God. I love this Read That Back. This Read That Back was so, so powerful. Like, this is a perfect example of our second principle of unity, how, like, all of these colonial divisions, all this race science used to divide our people are literally because of the colonizer. Exactly. I really unite with the, Chief Amelie just said, I really unite with this Read That Back because it lays out how colonizers have created these systems to divide us. Punto. Full unity. Like, that's literally it. Like, y'all, like, exactly. These colonial divisions are BS. Like, not only did they impose race science onto indigenous peoples, but to all people. Like, that's why we have anti-indigeneity, anti-Africanness, like all these other things that all these divisions between us and between our nations, because these are imposed because of the colonizer. And it's also really important to highlight that colonizers failed to eradicate indigenous Hawaiians when they initially landed, even though it was devastating. It was like 90% of their population was decimated when Haole first arrived. But like they said, like, they couldn't exterminate us, they couldn't eradicate us, and now they have to find different ways of doing so. So we couldn't physically murder all of you. Let me create a blood quantum to decide who is and isn't native, which is like exactly, it's colonial divisions, like, and it's the violence that also unfortunately our colonized people perpetrate as well. Like, oh, you're not indigenous enough, so you can't call yourself indigenous. Like, the colonizer literally disconnected us. We are relatives, we are siblings. Like, the reason that we are not we don't share the same community is because of our dispossession of the land. And it's also important to highlight that it's not 50% or more. It's not that Hawaiians with 50% or more blood quantum can maintain the land or whatever. It's okay. Sorry, I'll go get a little. It's a little hot, y'all. When it comes to blood quantum, I would get so angry. But yeah, so when we think about the math, like a full Hawaiian, full 100% Hawaiian, has a child with somebody who's mixed race. In 2 generations, that person is dispossessed of their land. And the land that they're dispossessed of is not only, it doesn't go to other Hawaiians, which, what? It goes to the state, it goes to the federal government. So it's not like, it wouldn't be justified either way, but it's more so like, this is a very clear and explicit attempt to dispossess indigenous Hawaiians of their land because of this race science that is literally BS. Like, they made it all up. But yeah, I'm back, Chief Federico. I'd love to hear your thoughts on blood quantum. I know we are both indigenous people who have been displaced, and I just want to hear your thoughts on it.
No, full unity, and I love how Honani Kaitras lays it out, what exactly is the purpose of blood quantum. It's attack on the colonized Hawaiian peoples to further erase them and terminate them and dispossess them in perpetuity, right? Continuously, and that's what they've done to all indigenous peoples across Turtle Island and Pachamama, right? And it unites with this thing that I read before, this essay on the mestizo concept, which is a product of European imperialism, right? Which just really lays out how these concepts, first of all, came as a result of colonization, right? The reason why peoples mixed with Europeans, and stuff was because of colonization, right? And why Asian peoples were brought to these lands in peonage, right, was because of colonization. And that's why we mix so much, but that doesn't make us any less of who we are, and that's what she's laying out too. And it's just used to dispossess people, take away self-determination, take away sovereignty, right? And eventually dictatorship, right, over our lives, labor, land, and resources. And I remember too, in this essay, they were talking about even Europeans, the Spaniards and stuff, right? They don't look like the original Iberian inhabitants of that land over 1,000 years ago, right? Because they've mixed, right? But they wouldn't call themselves any less Spanish, right? So why does that apply to us? And it's because of this colonial structure, right? That is meant to dispossess us in every way possible. So yeah, full unity with this.
Exactly. And I'm not going to be thankful that you raped my ancestors, that you literally murdered them. And that's why I'm, lighter skinned potentially than other indigenous people. I'm not going to be grateful for that. That's not something I'm proud of. That's not something that us as colonized people are yay, this is a badge that I love to wear. No, it's effed up. And it's really just a recognize, it just it just fully like solidifies for me the second principle of unity, that regardless of these colonial divisions, like we are all equal. Like I recognize myself as an indigenous person who's reconnecting to the land, like reconnecting to my people, and colonizers cannot take that away from me, cannot take that away from all indigenous people and all other colonized people as well. So yeah, full unity with that. And I want to highlight Chief Oju's comment that says the only reason they made these blood quantums was to steal more land. Exactly. Like, and they
Exactly.
really, like, explicitly show you that through their actions. Like, it's not. It's just so much. It's so much, yo.
It's so crazy too, like on TikTok, like you just find like all of these colonizers are now in the comments of like, what they term us like Latino people, right? Being like, you're white, you're this, you're not fully native. Like, you know what I mean? Like in every way possible to erase the native. Because like that's the colonizers' number one job is really to erase the native. And like they're even like doing it in these insidious ways on TikTok and everything else. And like two visibly brown Latinos, two Afro natives, right? Like it's just so horrific, even commenting to like African creators like, oh, you're 25% right because like 25% white because of like some race science that they've constructed where like they think like you can be like 25% right when you're not racially. What? That doesn't make sense. But it's obviously used, right, and it relates to this blood quantum structure and to erase your knowledge of who you are and have that connection.
Exactly. Full unity. Like, yeah, I just want us all to internalize that we are all equal. Like, regardless of what a white person, a colonizer, is trying to tell you, you recognize, you know who you are better than anybody. You know who you are better than a colonizer is. Like, what the heck? But yeah, so if you feel inspired by this book trap that Chief Federico and I are laying out, if you feel inspired by our principles of unity, if you're like, yo, I know we're all equal as colonized people, join us, join Black Hammer, and come see the amazing work that we're doing. Like, we don't just talk, we build. But yes.
Period. We building all day, every day.
Exactly. So yeah, we're gonna go into our announcements. This was such a fun book trap. Thank you everybody for coming. Chief Amelie just said, "White TikTok is gross." Exactly.
It's just all stolen stuff from like content creators of color.
Exactly. Ugh. Watching like colonizers sing like sacred Hawaiian chants on TikTok, and like indigenous Hawaiians being like, "Can y'all stop? Stop!"
Literally, which is why, if you want to actually get on the right side of history and not steal from colonized peoples to profit yourself and everything, you can join our reparations corps, like, which is this class that we have constructed for colonizers to get them on the right side of the equation and to understand what it means to be in unity with colonized peoples and to be united with us under our leadership, right? And you can learn through that through this reparations core, blackhammer.org/reparations, and sign up. It's an 8-week boot camp. And I think it just really lays out, to colonizers, like what colonialism is, what is the reason for this continued division across the world and its destruction, because where like these white communists like to reduce everything down to class and like capitalism, we're like, no, y'all are the problem too.
Exactly. Exactly. And like it's so silly. Like people are like, you want to exclude colonizers from your world? That's racist." Like you don't know how racism works then. Like you have no critical analysis of how the world works. Like like what? You can't be racist to a white person. You can't be racist to a colonizer. Like that's not how material reality works, yo. Like please, just like you don't like you just have to look, open your eyes, like critically think, like, oh wait, I'm poor and cleaning toilets because of this, like because I'm indigenous, because I'm colonized, like because these are jobs that white colonizers are not gonna do. Like, you know what I'm saying? So stop it. All right. let's get into it. Let's get into it. So yeah, our announcements, forging the hammer. So we will be studying individualism, combating individualism, and how important it is to just lean into the collective. And yeah, this forging the hammer is super important. It is mandatory for all members. It will be next Sunday, May 16th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So yeah, make sure to write it on your calendars. Yeah, love that.
Yes, combating individualism. And then next is Go Off Sis. So this is now every Friday with upcoming one, May 14th. And I really love Go Off Sis, right? Because it's to uplift colonized women and femmes and non-men, right? And you're gonna be a guest, Chief Itza. Oh my God. And the last like Go Off Sis was so brilliant, right? Because they were laying out like the horrors of the cosmetic industry and like what it does and all these crack a beauty standard, and what they mean for colonized people. So I'm excited for this Friday to see you there with Chief Afeni and Comrade Dio going off.
Yes, I love the Go Off Sis, like the theme song. You could ask my comrades, like I'll play in the car. I'm like, go, go, like oh, I'm like I love it, I love it. Giovanni like laying out those bars. I love it. So yeah, our final announcement is join the curriculum department. Are you a parent, teacher, youth worker, or just like learning? You in love with Black Hammer's political line? Join the curriculum department. You can email them at bhcurriculum@protonmail.com. Shout out to the curriculum department that makes PE so accessible, so easy to digest. And yeah, I know that I have learned a lot through the curriculum department by just breaking it down. They don't have to use all this complicated jargon like, like, no, just lay it out as you should. We're colonized working class people. Like, you don't have to use all these fancy words. We're not in the academia. So I really appreciate the curriculum department for that.
Yes, full unity. And then, yes, next week we're reading part 3. So come get into this book even more. It's just been so exciting, even getting into the first 2 parts. Like, Nanikai Trask is brilliant, and I'm excited to dive into part 3 and continue sharing with my comrades and having this discussion with you, Chief Ita.
Yes, I'm so excited, and I'm so excited for the development of this conversation. Like, I've learned so much, not only from you, Chief Federico, but from our brilliant comrades who tap into this book trap. Like, just the collective brilliance every day. Like, I'd be scared too if I wasn't a colonized person tapped into this brilliance. Like, I'd be shaking. Like, in a crumbling colony. Like, ooh, that's unfortunate.
Yes, have nothing on Hammer City.
Nothing.
This is what we about to announce, what we've raised. So drum roll. We've raised $350 total. So thank you to everyone who really donated and contribute. Like, you're here for the liberation of colonized peoples.
Yes, Reparations Crew said, so grateful for this political education and the collective brilliance of our revolutionary colonized leadership. Punto, punto. Like, there you go. And this is for free. Like, if you're a colonizer, tap into that reparations corps. Like, you'll learn way more in those 8 weeks. But if you really like this brilliance, yeah, join our reparations corps if you're a colonizer. Join Black Hammer if you're a colonized person. Like, the best thing we as colonized people can do is fight for our liberation. Like, no handouts, no like, oh hey, here's like, vote for this person, they're gonna get you free. Like, no. Rely on yourself. Rely on the colonized people that love you, that trust you, that are like, yo, I want to build with you. Like, I want to be free too. So yeah, I'm very excited, y'all. I'm so excited to continue to develop this. And with that, we will adjourn this amazing book trap. Thank you everybody for coming. We can end it with a nice strong land back.
Yes, thank you. Land back.